here to be part of the discussion this morning. We have two very experienced panelists that will speak well to part 4 of our Ready to Run series, Media and Marketing. You should have bios on both of our panelists, but to offer a quick overview, Terry Benham, we appreciate you coming up from Little Rock this morning. Terry is a public relations and political strategist with over 2 decades of experience. He has worked in PR for Fortune 500 companies, local government entities, nonprofit organizations, and small companies to help them communicate and protect their brand. As a political strategist, Terry has advised numerous political campaigns, committees, and organizations. He's also served as the regional political director for President-candidate Fred Thompson, senior political advisor to former Arkansas Lieutenant Governor Win Rockefeller, executive director of the Republican Party of Louisiana, and political director of the Republican Party of Arkansas. He is the founder and chairman of Impact Management Group, which is a public relations and public affairs firm based in Little Rock. He has also consulted overseas in the former Yugoslavia, Serbia, Montenegro, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. He is a veteran of our U.S. Army and is a graduate of the John F. Kennedy Warfare Center, attended the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville and Little Rock. He and his wife live in Benham, Arkansas, with their 2 children. So we're glad to have Terry here with us today. Our other experienced panelist is Laura Kellams. Many of us know Laura as she's here in Northwest Arkansas, and she is the director of Arkansas Advocates for Children and Families, which is a nonprofit which works on changing public policy on behalf of children. Before joining Advocates in 2008, Laura was a reporter for 14 years for the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette and the Morning News of Northwest Arkansas. And in that time, she covered pretty much everything, but spent most of her time in politics and government at state and local levels. Laura serves on the board of the United Way of Northwest Arkansas and the League of Women Voters in Washington County. She has a journalism degree from the University of Arkansas, and she has lived in Fayetteville for over 20 years with her husband, Kyle. And I do want to tell a quick story about Laura and how we became acquainted. When I was lobbying for the chamber in the Northwest Arkansas Council in Little Rock, and she was a reporter. And so we spent a lot of time in the hallways there. And for those of us that are from Northwest Arkansas that were lobbying or spending time in Little Rock, we would have a dinner once a week, and it still goes on, called the Fayetteville Mafia, so we could commiserate. You know, Northwest Arkansans can be together at least once a week. And Laura and I would be part of that group. And I remember when she was starting to think about leaving the paper, she kind of shared that with me. And she had been offered and accepted the position with Advocates. And she called me and she said, I'm really excited. I want to let you know, and now can we officially be friends? So, and we'll speak to that a little bit later today, and that's kind of why I find that story funny, but it is actually kind of relevant to what we're going to talk about today, that while we were friendly, she was reporting on issues that we were advocating for, so now I'm glad that we are officially friends. So, thanks for entertaining me with that story. Thank you again for both being here today. And what we'll do is have you guys speak a couple minutes, just give your overarching comments on media and marketing, and then we'll dive a little deeper and ask some questions and give you all an opportunity to ask them some questions as well. So, Terry, I'll let you kick that off.
Well, I'm not going to say a whole lot because I'd much rather hear your questions than any hot air that I would blow up here. But, as you're thinking about running for office, or maybe I know there was a couple of service firms here, how you handle the media can be the difference between being successful and underfunded, or being successful and overfunded, or being a complete nightmare and a train wreck for your personal life. And this could be possibly the most important segment of any type of consideration that you have for seeking public office, because we do live in a 24/7 news cycle now. And that is just a fact of life. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. I tell candidates this all the time. I tell corporations this all the time. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. It is what it is. And so you either brace what is, or you get trampled by it. And so I look forward to your questions, and I will be happy to stay over, extra 30 minutes or so, and answer any questions that you might have that you don't want to ask publicly, but you'd like to ask privately. And thanks for having us.
As Martine said, I spent most of my career as a reporter, but now I'm on the other side of that, and in fact I interviewed some of you in this room, including Representative Hobbs when she first ran, I believe. Now the past 3 years I've sort of been on the other side of that, and sometimes am interviewed by reporters, and so I sort of get the how that can be disconcerting, and you sort of turn your information over to this person that you are supposed to trust, but you don't really trust, and maybe it's not a great idea that you trust them. So I sort of understand what it's like coming from both ends. But as a person who was a reporter for a long time, I would just encourage you to, as Terry says, work with what you've got, and you can do it well if you stay on message, and you're disciplined, and you have relationships with the media, just like you would network in any other aspect of your business. There are human beings who are working and who live in your community, and getting to know them is not a bad idea. And Terry's probably more, he is definitely more experienced in the marketing and purchasing and that kind of thing than I would be, but as far as talking to reporters, I'd be interested in any questions that you have.
All right, great. Well, we'll open up for questions, and I'll just kick off and just ask about, in consideration of whether you're running from, there may be a large scope here as far as an interest in running for office, anywhere from school board to state rep to maybe even a congressional office. But maybe speak to, as you make those decisions in developing a media and marketing plan, what that might look like, and maybe talk about the different scenarios where, I'm sure you have to have some sort of skeletal plan to a more robust plan. So maybe, Terry, do you mind kicking off and maybe make some comments about that?
Okay. Just in general about developing a media plan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, a lot of times I see candidates make the mistake of jumping out there and getting their name in the paper. I know that most of you have looked at some point and read an article and said, oh, why did they answer that question? I don't know that that's necessarily good for them. Well, about 80% of the time is because they wanted to see their name in the paper. But there was no real strategy about why they were a part of the story, or a strategy about what they were actually saying. It's very important before whatever office that you seek, that you have a strategy about what you're talking about. With the political candidates that we've worked for, we always tell them, the first step is running a poll. Find out A, if you can win, and then B, find out what the people that you're proposing to represent. Let's find out what they're thinking, what's important to them, and then let's talk about those things that are important to them, and not necessarily what's important to you. Because I'm going to pick on a hot button topic here, the issue of abortion. How many of you have seen a city council person or a county sheriff that made sure that you knew that they were pro-life?
Me.
Well, you know, the last time I checked, the county sheriff didn't have anything to do with that. So, you know, that's something that's important to them, that I think if they polled the average citizen and said, what's the top 3 issues that the county sheriff ought to be focused on, I don't think that would probably come in even the top 20. Does that make sense? And so when you're developing your media plan or your message plan, and I really like to focus more on message because the media always comes after the message. But when you're focusing your message plan, figure out what the citizens are thinking, and then talk to what is important to them. Back in the days, I've been doing campaigns for 20 years, and as you guys can imagine, campaigns have changed a lot in the last 20 years. And with that, some of the tools that were available have changed a lot. You can run a small poll now pretty cheap. Used to, 10 years ago, you couldn't do it cheap. And so you would have a lot of folks that, would get out there and they would just completely be off message, and they would destroy their own campaign when they had a pretty good organization, they had a pretty good chance to win, and they thought that that as long as they went out there and they knocked on a door and made people like them, that they could get elected. And I'm sure in some cases maybe that worked. I know a lot of people that used to think that, but what I always tried to advocate to them was people will like you if they can identify with you. That's how the people like you, is if they can identify with you. If you're concerned about the same issues that they're concerned with, there's only 2 ways to do that. There's run a poll and find that out, or get out there on the streets and talk to as many people as you can and find out what's important to them. And you know what? When you find out what's important to them, you may figure out that you're not the right fit for the office you're running for, because you may be on the wrong side of everything that's important to them. Does that make sense? So that's where I would tell you to start on developing. It starts with message before it gets to media. And if you'll focus on the message first, then you can have a good shot at developing an effective media plan.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, and we use that actually in the organization I work for now, that thinking strategically through messaging and not thinking that a story being in the paper is the end, it's a means to an end. And the strategy long term is, what do you want and how does that get you there? Not just having your name in the paper, but is it in a way that you want it to be, and as much as you are able to control that. One thing I was just going to say about the range of offices that you can run for, interestingly, in working with with the media, not necessarily a long-term plan, but just in working with reporters, that it might surprise you to know that you may get more coverage at a very local level when you're running for office than you would at even higher levels, especially after you're in office. That if you are on the school board or the city council, chances are there is a reporter who's assigned to every meeting that you speak at, and every word that you say, and every vote that you take, and that person will put that in the paper and cover that beat. And if you are in Congress, you're covered by the national media and maybe just a little bit at the state level. And every single thing you do is not necessarily reaching all of your local constituents. People know what the big Congress is doing, but they don't necessarily know what their member is doing. But at the very local level, you may actually get more coverage day to day, and so you might actually need to be more prepared to defend what you do and to stay on message on that at the local level, believe it or not.
Great. That's very insightful. Questions from the audience? Yes.
I guess this question would be for both of you, since you're from different parts of the state. But you mentioned asking people what's important to them. What do you guys think is important to voters? And is it different in Northwest Arkansas, Central Arkansas, South, the Delta? Does it change?
I can tell you without any hesitation, without even any thought, if you go, at least, let's say we're polling in about 8 different states right now, and if you go to the western edge of that and to the eastern edge of that, it's jobs, jobs, jobs. Nothing's even close second. The jobs in the economy is such a huge, huge issue. I've never seen numbers as strong as they are right now. I mean, nothing's even registering as a close second. 30-point spread.
Between like the number 1 and number 2
Yeah.
most important thing.
Yeah.
Wow. What's number 2?
Healthcare. It's just not even close.
I think that answered.
I think he's
I'm
got
not
the
polling.
facts.
I'm not polling anyone right now.
He's got the evidence.
And let me tell you this about dealing with political consultants. I'm one of those people you hear a lot of criticism about people like me. I don't do anything without numbers. People will tell you a lot of things, numbers don't lie, period. Now they can say, well, numbers can be, massaged and shaped and all that. Yes, that's true. That's why we do our own polls, because I don't want bad data. If you make strategic decisions on good data, you will always be in a position to win. It doesn't mean that you'll win, but it means you'll be in a position to win. And if the data says that everyone's talking and thinking about jobs, then everyone's talking and thinking about jobs, and you better be talking and thinking about jobs.
So, both of you touched on this earlier in your comments, but with the staying on message, in preparing for interviews, a lot of times candidates will know, they'll have a scheduled interview or they'll go to an editorial board, but talk about preparing for those interviews, but then also always being prepared for when somebody is at those meetings or is at a candidate forum or catches you at the restaurant or what it may be. Sometimes reporters will ask candidates or elected officials questions where it's not a scheduled interview, and speak to staying on message, because a lot of times those questions can be pretty prodding, but talk about always wanting to maintain your message out there. So Laura, start with you.
Well, and Terry may have a better answer of what he tells
I'm
candidates.
interested in your answers. I'm taking notes on your answers.
Well, reporters are by nature skeptical, and they're going to want to get you off of, they're going to sense that you're saying only one thing over and over again, and they're going to realize, I don't want that to be the only thing that this guy says. I'm going to try to get him or her to say something else. And I think essentially you have to be disciplined. You don't just repeat the same sentence over and over again, but you ensure that you get back to what it is that you want them to know. I think it was it Chancellor White at the university who was famous for saying, answer the question you wish they had asked. But that doesn't always work, like you say, if it's extremely probing that they're wanting to get at something. I guess my best advice is to just always be honest, don't guess. I could be wrong, but I feel like oftentimes I was a I don't know if all reporters are like this, but you have this perception of when someone's being very cagey or when they're being relaxed, and if you don't come across as very cagey, then you're probably going to get further. One of the best things I can tell you is that reporters almost always say at the end of an interview, whether it's just in the hallway at the Capitol or in a scheduled interview, they almost always say, is there anything else? And you always have to never say no to that question. Always say yes, and even if it's just to repeat the last thing you want them to know, the most important thing you want them to know, always say, yeah, there is one more thing. I just want you to understand, X, Y, Z, or whatever. But don't you think they always ask that?
Yes.
Because they want to know that they forgot anything. What do you want to
The only thing I would add to that is, kind of goes back to what we just discussed. Know what the issues that are current, and then do your homework. Don't be lazy. Look, there's no room for lazy people in public life. I'm just going to tell you that right now. If you're thinking that you can run for school board and just skate through because it's a smaller office, you are kidding yourselves. So don't be lazy. Do your homework, know the issues, and know how you feel about the issues. And then I would say be able to offer your opinion on those issues in 20 seconds or less. Give sound bites. You can always expand on it later when they do a follow-up question. But give a soundbite answer and see if they have an interest in that issue, and then come back to it. And then the last thing is, which goes back on what she was touching on, is the spin point. We call it the spin point. If Laura is interviewing me and she asks me a question that I really don't want to talk about, how I might answer that is, I would say, well, Laura, that's a really good question, and I share that concern as well, but one of the problems with that whole issue is the fact that we can't have good jobs right now. You see what I'm saying? And now I'm talking about jobs because I know that that's what you want to talk about, is jobs. And you take that one issue that you didn't want to talk about and you talk about the question that you wish she would have asked, which was about jobs. And you get right back on your talking points and drive home your message.
That's a good way of illustrating that you're not actually talking to the reporter, even though that might be who you're talking to and who you have the relationship with, but it's the person who's reading that story in the paper or who's seeing it on television that you're trying to get to, and
That's right.
what's important to them. The talking in short sentences is really important and something I haven't mastered yet in talking to reporters, but rambling on and on is just going to get you in trouble in all kinds of ways.
Yes.
But it's also going to make it where you don't have anything good and punchy that you've said that may be used as a quote in the paper or whatever, but certainly being succinct is important.
I have a good friend. I'm not going to name any names because some of the people in this room know who I'm talking about, but I have a good friend who cannot stand silence. If the room gets quiet, he has this compelling urge to say something more when you want him to shut up. Just nothing else, because when you start saying something more, that's when the reporter goes, oh, well, I haven't thought about this yet. And now you could be setting yourself up for a train wreck. I mean, a train wreck when you could have been completely avoided by just shutting up.
Oh, that reminds me of that
Answer
other
their question and move on.
Well, and we're just going to go back and forth.
Yeah, this is great.
The reporters are actually trained to use silence, and because they know that people can't stand silence, and so we would learn at conferences and in journalism school and everything else that you keep that silence. You ask the question, and I was always had an urge to be nice to people, which is probably why I'm not a reporter anymore. But so I would say, so why did you do that? Or was it just because you were worried about this or that? And that's not something that a reporter should do. It should be, why did you do that? And then they have to fill the silence, and the person needs to fill the silence, and you use that to get the answer out of them. And so just know that they want silence. So just let it lie. They have
Stare
to
down the lion.
Right. They have to ask the next question. They're going to be like me and say, "Or was it just because you were upset?" Or,
Why do I think newspapers feel compelled to endorse a candidate? And how often does that happen? And how do you know that they've endorsed a candidate?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. It's a weird, and sometimes I wonder why they still do it. It's just because they've always done it. And but I think at least in the newspapers I worked for, it was never going to come as a surprise that they were going to endorse someone because they interview the candidates. The editorial board is separate from the reporters. So when an editorial board endorses a candidate, and that is in the editorial column that runs on the editorial page, that has nothing to do with the people who are covering the story, or it shouldn't in any ethical news operation. But the people who are in charge of the newspaper's opinion stance, which is separate from the news, they will interview the candidates. They'll bring them in. They may interview them for longer than the reporters ever did, and ask them. I'm sure David went through this with his run. That it's a different set of people. Hopefully it was in your case. It should be, and they so and you probably even know. They may tell you, the endorsement's going to come out on Sunday or something like that. And do they give you a heads up before? It was separate from me as a reporter, which is good. So I don't even know. But did they tell you before?
No, they don't tell you. I mean,
so you wake up in the morning.
You know what? You have a pretty good idea what day they're going to come down, but you do.
Right.
They don't tell you.
And if it was the Democrat Gazette, you knew that wasn't going to be
It
you.
wasn't going to be me. And more,
Right.
the Northwest Arkansas newspapers.
Right. Now they're all
we're getting a feeling
owned by
that
the same people, right?
you go to be polite because you don't want to hide from anyone, but you don't.
That's right.
And just from my own experience, I don't know that the modern electorate looks at newspaper endorsements and gives a darn.
Yeah.
I think I hate to say
I
it, but I
agree
think
with
it
that.
makes the editorial board feel good that they have this opinion, but I don't think it sways any elections I've ever seen.
No,
I
certainly.
agree.
In fact, haven't they?
I agree.
Don't they have a pretty bad record as far as who wins after they endorse them? Like some people say,
Yeah,
oh, I got the endorsement, that's the kiss of death, or something like that.
Yeah, it's always been a long cliche in Fayetteville. If you want to win, you want the newspaper to endorse your opponent.
Yeah. That's funny.
So if you don't get endorsed, what do you do? I mean, does it matter? I mean,
I guess you
in
just
that
let it
case?
go.
What day is it? If it's Tuesday, then you focus on what's on Tuesday's to-do list. I have never thought a single day about endorsements that we won or we lost. There have been a couple of times when we were in tough campaigns that we decided to take some headlines, put them on a mail piece, and push them out. And in a lot of local races, a lot of times that's more circulation than the local paper. And I've never put much stock in this. Don't get me wrong, I've always wanted them. Why would you not want them? And I think they're good to have because it allows candidates to have something to go out there and have a debate and fight for on the issues. But as far as relevance to the actual vote on election day, I don't know a single person that goes, well, I have to vote for so-and-so because the Arkansas Democrat Gazette endorsed them. I mean, I just don't know anyone that does that.
Do you think it matters more at the local level where they may not know, like even what school board district they live in or what city council ward they live in? Do you think it would matter more, in any of your experience, that the voters literally don't even know who's running, that they might, I think sometimes in newspapers, don't they like even make a little clip this out, taking the voting booth, which is kind of weird. But that maybe they think, oh, if the paper likes them and I have no idea who's running, then maybe I'll vote. Do people care? Do you do any of those more local races?
Well, I don't, but I am a voter. I'm a local voter, and even as involved as I am in politics, I still don't know a lot of these local candidates.
Right.
I just don't. But I don't look at the Benton Courier to see if, who they're endorsing. I might call the Chamber of Commerce and say, is one of these candidates more business friendly than the other?
Yeah.
But outside of that, not really.
So speaking of relevance, I'm curious to get y'all's thoughts on social media. We've seen, particularly in recent years, the effect that social media has had, particularly in the Tea Party movement, in that initiating a significant grassroots initiative and engaging a greater portion of our population. On the flip side of that, I sometimes think about, you know, in social media, is this just a cloud of people that are all just talking amongst one another? And so does that, at the end of the day, resonate into votes and turning people out to the polls? So I'd love to get y'all's perspective on using social media and the relevance that you think that it plays. Terry, I'll kick it off to you.
It is absolutely relevant. There's a regime change in Egypt because of social media. It's very relevant. Now, it's very much a news medium as well, and an uncontrolled news medium. So social media, although very impactful, can also be very dangerous. You know, a lot of campaigns, especially some of the larger campaigns, which is a little bit surprising. You expect that from smaller campaigns, but a lot of the larger campaigns, they will embrace social media to be relevant and to be current and to be in, but there's no real strategy outside of that. And what they find out, or what they wind up doing, is being totally irrelevant, looking not current, and basically defeating the purpose that they originally planned, because they didn't have a strategic plan on how to implement their social media strategy, grow their universe, and be able to utilize that as an actual campaign tool, just like they would a direct mail program or a broadcast media program or whatever. The other thing I would say is a lot of people waste an incredible amount of time on social media. Now this is not what I would say is social media. Maybe this is the roots of social media. Y'all remember Bull Whiz? Bull Whiz was all the rage, you know, about 10 years ago. It was
a listserv.
It was really an